Donald Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, as some are calling her, McEnany. I don't know how you pronounce her last name, but by that I mean you personally, but you know who I'm talking about. She could barely keep her lies straight yesterday at a 26-minute press briefing that she gave. And we have to come to the realization that they are barely going to even try to hide their wrongdoing at this point in time. So when she started doing these press briefings, I would live stream them and I would sometimes say, let's do an over under and put it at 3 minutes. Will it take Kayleigh more than 3 minutes to tell her first lie or less than 3 minutes? And she told a lie after like 20 seconds. So the next time I streamed one of her press briefings, I said, let's do the over under at 20 seconds. And then she told the first lie within 12 seconds. So there's not even a point to doing that anymore. These are brazenly lie-riddled press briefings. Let's get into what happened yesterday. When we learned yesterday that Donald Trump tweeted threats to the governor of Michigan about, if you vote by mail, I may not send you aid money that you need, including for the recent flooding in Michigan. We knew that Kayleigh was going to be asked questions about this, and she was. And one of the questions was a good one, which is, you've already admitted that Trump talks to the Michigan governor regularly. Why tweet a threat about vote by mail rather than just communicate it directly? Kayleigh McEnany said that that's called transparency.
Yes, Jack.
Kayleigh, how often does the president talk to Director Vogt or Acting Director Vogt from the OMB?
To who?
To the Acting Director of OMB.
Often. He just was in the Oval Office with the president, so they do speak often. I don't have a readout of the president's schedule, but they do speak regularly.
So if he wanted to flag to him his concerns about Michigan, why didn't he just tell him instead of sending a tweet?
Because the president believes in unprecedented transparency, and I'm sure you as a journalist are very eager and excited when you learn about the president's decision-making process in real time, whether that's on Twitter or from me here up at the podium.
You just said that was the reasoning for him expressing
I didn't
his
say that was the
concerns?
reasoning, but I'm saying this is a transparent president, and I think that that's something that you should be lauding rather than questioning as to why he decided to tweet this. Yes.
Apart from President Macron.
This is truly a mix of 1984 and Brave New World and a totalitarian dictatorship where facts simply don't matter. War is peace, defeat is victory. Accusing a governor of a crime on Twitter without evidence is what they call unprecedented transparency. And good for the reporters in the room. I mean, this is pretty lukewarm praise, but they kept asking about this issue. And Kayleigh kept doing this move where she refers them to the campaign. That's really a campaign issue. You're going to have to talk to the 2020 Trump campaign about that. Why is she doing that? Because the question is about something Trump said as president, about the disbursement of funds that he manages as president. Why would that go to the Trump campaign? And also, Kayleigh McEnany herself is a lawyer. Nope, that's for the campaign, which is basically a way of saying, go ask somebody else.
Can you tell us what law specifically the president thinks the Secretary of State in Michigan broke by sending out the applications? And did the Secretary of State in Georgia also break that law by sending out applications for their primary?
Again, I'd reference you to the campaign. These are ballot questions, and I'd reference you to the campaign on that.
He's the president,
That's
and
my
you're
former
his
employer. My
spokesperson.
current employer is the White House. So,
But, that's not a campaign question. That's the president of the United States saying that a
it's a campaign
state
question
broke
on
the law.
ballot initiatives that you have and absentee ballots. So I would refer you to the campaign on that front. And I would note to you that many of those ballots that are submitted via mail can be fraudulent. I cited to you the bipartisan study. I can read it again. Maybe you weren't paying attention when I read it the first time, so I'll read it again. President Carter, a Democrat, not a Republican, and James Baker concluded that these ballots remained the largest source of potential voter fraud. So if you cast a ballot via mail and you do so fraudulently, that would be an illegal act, and I'd point you to that. And for further, I'd point you to my former employer, which is the Trump campaign.
Also important, I want to remind you, and I'm going to become a bit of a broken record on this, vote by mail fraud is mathematically non-existent. Yesterday, I gave you the numbers. 250 million people have voted by mail in the last 20 years. There are 7 to 8 cases, not 7 to 8%. There are 7 to 8 cases of vote by mail fraud per year. There is way more in-person voter fraud. Of course, there are more in-person ballots cast, but those numbers also are completely insignificant. This type of what I call retail strategy voter fraud is essentially non-existent. Do not fall for it. Now, here's a really Orwellian moment where Kayleigh McEnany was asked about Susan Rice. Susan Rice is Barack Obama's former national security advisor. She recently, a letter that she wrote, a memo that she wrote in 2017, which is exculpatory of Barack Obama in the context of Obamagate, was recently released. I told you about it yesterday. Kayleigh McEnany does this thing where she has a page in this notebook with disinformation that she will turn to whenever a question is asked that even tangentially relates to something she has in her book. Now, that's fine. I'm not criticizing her for having notes. It's called being prepared. It's called research. That's okay. But the thing is, if Kayleigh hears one word that relates to her pages, she will turn to the page and read the page, even if it has nothing to do with the question. And in this case, the name Susan Rice was mentioned in a very specific exculpatory context. And Kayleigh turns to her Susan Rice page and she reads 2 minutes of unrelated attacks on Susan Rice. Sort of sounds like she's arguing that Susan Rice's letter was just a lie. And I'm actually going to play the full 2 minutes for you. Normally, I would just slice out the key part. But what you really need to see, Susan Rice's name is mentioned. Kayleigh turns to a page about Susan Rice, spends 2 minutes reading unrelated things about Susan Rice, and then quickly ends the press conference and leaves. This is happening at almost every single one of these press conferences. Let's take a look. I apologize for subjecting you to 2 minutes of this, but it's important.
And I know you brought up Susan Rice in that context, but I'm going to bring her up in another context that's equally as newsworthy, and that is the email that was declassified from Susan Rice on Inauguration Day, which is so peculiar. It set the scene. It's Inauguration Day. You're moving out of the White House. This is the most powerful building on planet Earth. Susan Rice is moving out, reflecting on her time here, and what is she doing? She's not packing her boxes. She's not being nostalgic about her time in the White House. What she's doing is writing an email where 3 times she writes that President Obama emphasized to conduct the investigation into Michael Flynn by the book, by the book, by the book. She writes it 3 times. As Shakespeare said, thou doth protest too much, Susan Rice. He didn't have the Susan Rice part in there, but I'll add that in. 2, she was asked specifically about the unmasking of Michael Flynn after she discussed it on January 5th in the Oval Office with Obama, after she wrote this email to herself on Inauguration Day. She was asked by a good journalist, Judy Woodruff, about this email and about the unmasking of Michael Flynn, not the email, but the unmasking. She was asked specifically about Nunes's claim specifically. So let me clarify, it was Nunes's claim. And she said, I know nothing about this, so it was a lie. And then Susan Rice, since no one brought it up to me, I will bring it up to you. Her attorney said that this was the first opportunity 3 weeks after this Oval Office meeting that she had to write this email memorializing her Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama discussing Michael Flynn. It was her first opportunity, she said. Interesting, because she had an opportunity in those 3 weeks on January 10th to do a passing of the baton event with none other than Michael Flynn, where she praised him, wished him success, and talked about the great transition into the White House. And then on January 12th, she was able to participate in a story that published on that date in the lifestyle section of the Washington Post. So she never had time to write this email until Inauguration Day as she's rushing out the door, when in fact she had an opportunity to do all of those things. I'll leave that with you. Thank you for bringing up Susan Rice, not in the context that I wished, but for allowing me to share that with you.
So the reason I played all of that is that it's really important for you to understand that this is what they claim is radical transparency. And it's not, of course. It's reading pre-planned talking points and then walking off the stage before anybody can say, hey, that stuff you just said has nothing to do with my question. And the saddest part, the most tragic part of this is that Trumpists love her. They think she's doing so well at her job. She doesn't answer questions. She does 20-minute press briefings. Yesterday's was 26 minutes after showing up 30, 40 minutes late. That it's her speech and her questions, 26 minutes. She reads non sequitur material from her notes, and then she leaves. And the Trumpists are gleeful because to them, this counts as strength. Turning weird, like yesterday, she turned a question back on a reporter. Don't you agree, XYZ? That's not what a reporter is there for. Lying, barely keeping it together, attacking the media, walking out abruptly. That's the state of affairs. And the Trumpists are thrilled because they believe she's owning the liberal media. We live in a very, very backwards country right now. Let me remind you, Monday is Memorial Day. We will be doing a one-day huge membership special If you've been thinking about getting a membership, of course, the #1 way to support our show, Monday is a perfect day to do it. Trump's phone call wasn't perfect. Monday is the perfect day to get yourself a membership. If you want to be notified about the Monday special, just get on my mailing list at davidpakman.com. One of our sponsors today is a company I love. I reached out to them about sponsoring the show, and I'm thrilled that they are. It's a company called Chipmunk Baking. They make delicious, fresh cookies and brownies. They use healthy ingredients like sunflower seed flour, allulose, monk fruit sweetener. So everything is sugar-free, low carb. They use healthy fats. It's perfect for a ketogenic diet if you are on one. And even though there's no sugar, you really would never be able to tell the difference. They have the same taste, the same texture as all the desserts you love, but you can enjoy them without any of the guilt. Everything that Chipmunk Baking offers is delicious. I'm personally a huge fan of what they're doing. You should definitely give it a try for yourself. And they're giving you 10% off your entire order when you go to davidpakman.com/cookies and use the coupon code Pakman. I've put a link right underneath the video.